Assassination Records Review Board, Agency HSCA, File Number 014316. The Testimony of Willem Oltmans, date 04/01/77, 143, page transcript, unclassified. This was part of the House of Representatives hearings before the subcommittee on the assassination of John F. Kennedy of the Select Committee on Assassination, formerly classified Sensitive Executive Session. In Washington, D.C., the subcommittee met in executive session at 10:18 a.m. in room 2318 Rayburn House Office Building, the Honorable Richard Pryor, chairman of the subcommittee, presiding. Present also were Stokes, Fauntleroy, Burke, Dodd, Anderson, McKinney, and council staff and assistants. Mr. Tannenbaum says, "Now, sir, when you were assigned to interview Mr. De Mohrenschildt, you went to Dallas and attempted to interview him?" Mr. Oltman replies, "I called him from New York, and he said, that was in March '68. He said, yes, I will do it. But I have to go to a Mexican oil conference. Call me in 2 weeks again." And NOS Television, Mr. Eklar, head of Dutch television, instructed me to approach Robert Kennedy's office in New York, which I did. As I recall, the 2nd of April, I went to Robert Kennedy's office on 43rd Street in New York City, the post office building, and I spoke with his press aide. Senator Kennedy was making a speech at Albany. He flew back in the Caroline. Robert Kennedy heard the story I was trying to get to De Mohrenschildt, and he called, for no reason whatsoever, J. Edgar Hoover, personally. Hoover then had one of his division chiefs of the FBI contact me, and within a few hours, 4 agents arrived at my house in Kew Gardens, where I maintain residence in the United States. The FBI agents questioned me for 2 hours. They said from that moment onwards, I was under the express protection of the FBI for 24 hours a day. I wouldn't notice it, but I would be under the FBI's protection. The next evening, I drove on West Side Drive in my car, and there was a car all the time next to me, parallel. On the 53rd exit, I was making the wrong reaction, and this car sped up a bit and cut me off. I was totally destroyed. It was the only automobile accident I've ever had in my life. I was cut off. I crashed. The car was a total loss. I got a new car from the Chrysler Corporation. I left the country immediately. Mr. Tannenbaum: Now again, when was it for the first time that you actually met face-to-face with George De Mohrenschildt? Mr. Oltmans: 15th of October with the CBS crew in Dallas. I went to his apartment at the time and interviewed both Mr. and Mrs. De Mohrenschildt for the 40 minutes of television tape. That was in Dallas, Texas. Mr. Tannenbaum: Now, will you tell us in substance what you said to George De Mohrenschildt back in 1968 and what he said to you in substance, Mr. Oltmans? Mr. Oltmans: In substance, Oswald was a nice guy. He loved President Kennedy. He would never have killed President Kennedy. That is what George De Mohrenschildt believed, despite the lies of the cover story that he participated in, for which he was now remorseful. The Warren Commission, when Ford was in the chair and questioned me, they deliberately distorted our testimony. They put all our lives in there. We are now being looked upon as outlaws in the society of Dallas. That was the substance of that tape. Mr. Tannenbaum: Did you take notes of that conversation, sir? Mr. Oltmans: I never do when I film. And we thought that film was enough, so from that moment onwards, I would go every year, once or twice, on my lecture tours through the United States, visit them in Dallas, and I became very close with the De Mohrenschildts. And as a matter of fact, I stayed many weekends there for numerous days, But in 1969, I went with Mr. and Mrs. De Mohrenschildt to the CBS studio in Dallas, and I taped him and his wife for 9 or 8 hours. I don't know the exact time, but on 9 tapes, of which I gave you one, we put the entire Oswald story, the truth of it, as he later admitted to. According to Mr. De Mohrenschildt, how he met Oswald and how it ended. Mr. Tannenbaum. Well, now, I'll have to check on that. Will you tell us in substance, sir, what you said to Mr. De Mohrenschildt on this occasion and what he said to you in regards to the assassination of the president? Mr. Oltmans. Now, to sum up this record, the essence of what he said was that Mr. De Mohrenschildt was not sure that Oswald killed Kennedy, that he believed that he had not killed Kennedy. But the tape is littered with bits and pieces of information that your committee probably could better work with than I could or our television station. The biographical history of De Mohrenschildt as a white Russian spy internationally in Greece, his associations with the Kennedy family, Johnson, etc., etc. Why did De Mohrenschildt go with the Russian Colonel Orlov to find Oswald in Fort Worth? Who was this man Orlov? Who is the colonel? Why did he go with the colonel to look for Oswald? Why did he go to Fort Worth and take the Russian with him? What was the relationships between De Mohrenschildt's oil companies and the CIA? What were De Mohrenschildt's relationships to his right-wing brethren in the Texas Crusade for Freedom, whose members included Earl Cabell, the CIA mayor of Dallas, De Goyler, Byrd, and Ted Dealey of Dealey Plaza fame. De Mohrenschildt was conveniently assigned business in Haiti in June 1963, and at that point he probably never saw Oswald again. However, during the Warren Commission, he met with Allen Dulles privately, according to Colonel Prouty, and perhaps you could look into that. Allen Dulles, of course, being the former director of the CIA who Kennedy fired, and of course was a prominent member of the Warren Commission. Again, conveniently. Also, you might want to look into De Mohrenschildt's letter in 1976 to CIA Director George Bush asking for his assistance to stop the CIA agents from following him, as it was making him paranoid and nervous, and he feared for his life. You see, George Bush had roomed with De Mohrenschildt's nephew, Edward Hooker, at Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass. But I digress. Also, the Payne family may have some CIA connections, despite their cover as Quakers, as it was arranged by George De Mohrenschildt for the Oswalds to meet the Paynes. It is all very, very mysterious, Mr. Tannenbaum. And this was discussed during this tape session? Mr. Oltmans. That was on the tapes. Yes, sir. I also have dozens, almost 100 personal letters from Mr. De Mohrenschildt to me in Holland. Mr. Tannenbaum. Now, you have already indicated to us in substance what George De Mohrenschildt told you about Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination of the president up until 1977. During all the meetings that you had with Mr. De Mohrenschildt, did he ever indicate anything different from what he had told you on past occasions? Mr. Oltmans. He would make strange cadenzas. For example, at one point, 2 years ago, he would say, "Well, of course I killed Kennedy. Of course I was involved with Kennedy. Look." And he would give me a picture and write on the back, "From the biggest crook in the Western Hemisphere, George De Mohrenschildt," or Jersey, as was his birth name. Jersey had photos of Western assassins, and he's been driven suicidally insane by his guilt and paranoia about the issue. His lawyer, Mr. Russell, told me that George is in a mental hospital and he's getting the worst electric shock that anyone can get, and he's in a very bad state. He suffers from a persecution complex. He's getting medical tests, the complete thing. This was probably part of the CIA MK-Ultra interrogation torture. At Bishop College, De Mohrenschildt was close to tears. He said, "Willem, I have to tell you the story as it really was. But don't betray me. Don't hang me. I trust you. You are the only journalist I will trust. I have waited for you to come. Don't incriminate me, was the word. Don't incriminate me in the Kennedy assassination. I don't want to go to jail. How could we do it in such a way that I don't go to jail? He said. And I said to him, well, first tell me, did you do it or didn't you do it? He replied, yes, I am responsible. I feel responsible for, I might as well use his words, for the behavior of Lee Harvey Oswald. I said, in what way? Jersey said, because I guided him. I instructed him to set it up. Now you remember, Mr. Tannenbaum, when I came to your committee before that I didn't know whether De Mohrenschildt was alive or not. He had disappeared in Europe. But he had told me his story in deep background on the record, and he had left a little bit to my judgment to produce a story for television in the Netherlands or for the world that would, as Somerset says, walk on the razor's edge. And I saw this was the case. He begged me, take me out of the country because they are after me. And of course I asked him who they are, and he tried to explain, but he wanted to get out as quickly as possible because he felt threatened. Mr. Tannenbaum. Who were they? Mr. Oltmans. Well, he indicated in his manuscript of the book that we had been talking about, Jersey mentioning the names of CIA and FBI people who were connected with the Kennedy assassination. He mentions one that I will go on record mentioning, Mr. Parker of the FBI, that came to Haiti within 24 hours of the Kennedy assassination to intimidate Mr. De Mohrenschildt in such a way that De Mohrenschildt felt he should put this name in his manuscript. George De Mohrenschildt said that the CIA and FBI do not want his story to come out. And Mr. De Mohrenschildt was also paranoid of the Jewish Nazi hunters because his family were Nazi sympathizers and had asked directly for the help of German Nazis to get his father and him into Germany through Belgium. In particular, he said a Mr. Winrath, a very famous Jewish Nazi hunter, came to Dallas and paid him a visit. So he said, even the Jewish mafia is now after me. So De Mohrenschildt was probably also associated with Operation Paperclip to get Nazis to work for the United States. Would you like me to go into any details about his control over Oswald, Mr. Tannenbaum? No, thank you. I'd rather hear about some other things. Like, how did he know that Oswald acted on his instructions if he was in Haiti? Mr. Oltmans. George De Mohrenschildt was confident that Oswald had acted at his instructions because De Mohrenschildt is an experienced intelligence officer. He had worked for various intelligence communities, the French and others, the CIA, and there are many question marks of his connections with the State Department and work in Yugoslavia, looking for oil in Tito's Yugoslavia, looking for oil in Batista's Cuba on government contracts. He said that he was often just given land or surveys for his intelligence work that he took for granted was a quid pro quo. Mr. Tannenbaum. Did he tell you that? Mr. Oltmans. Yes, he told me that. George De Mohrenschildt had gay black friends in Dallas, Texas, who he was giving some of his paintings to recently, shortly before he was committed suicide. On the tape recording of his suicide, it sounds like somebody walks up to him and pulls the trigger, blows his brains out, and then walks away. So, that's strange. That, of course, was just before he was due to testify here, sir. George De Mohrenschildt also said that he knew Jack Ruby and H.L. Hunt, and that Oswald was calling H.L. Hunt for funding for the assassination on George's behalf. In 1969, I found Loren Hall in California. Loren Hall had been running arms to Cuba in connection with the Cuban Revolution, and he had at one time his truck with arms parked in Lester Logue's, who was a very important Dallas oil man, in his driveway, and the police found his truck there. So Logue was in trouble to explain why a truck with arms was in his driveway. Now, when Lauren Hall went on my television camera, the film that television submitted to your committee last time I submitted to you, Lauren Hall says on that film that he was offered $50,000 to take part in the Kennedy assassination in the office of Mr. Lester Logue in Dallas, and that there were 5 people present in that meeting, including a trucking executive and several other people, and that Mr. Lauren Hall said, "I don't mind to take part in the assassination of Fidel Castro, that commie bastard, but I will be caught dead taking part in the assassination of the President of the United States." So he went underground to try to kill him. That is what he said. He was offered $50,000 in the office of Logue. I went to Dallas and stayed with George De Mohrenschildt, and George said, "Lester Logue is one of my closest friends." De Mohrenschildt and Logue did an oil survey for Batista in Cuba together. De Mohrenschildt told me to look in his Petroleum Club phone book and call Logue. Now, I called Logue from De Mohrenschildt's house, and I had that on film that he went into a frenzy when I told him that I knew he offered money to kill Kennedy. He threatened me and told me that he would sue me and call the CIA and the FBI, but I offered to hear his story. I would bring a CBS crew there, but he said, "The FBI is not interested in you, and I'm not interested in you, and I will have nothing to do with you." That is the story of Lester Logue, Logue, close friend of George De Mohrenschildt. But De Mohrenschildt was adamant that Oswald followed up his detailed instructions on how to set up an ambush of President Kennedy, with the alignment of the motorcade, bringing the parade route on that sharp turn around in front of the Texas Book Depository building, slowing it down with the triangulation, and all of that jazz. De Mohrenschildt said there was a crossfire and that Oswald had many friends among the Cubans. He never said pro-Castro or anti-Castro, but I assume it was the anti-Castro Cubans, as they worked with the CIA. You see, George De Mohrenschildt treated Oswald like he was a soldier in his Polish regiment when De Mohrenschildt ran a Polish regiment of soldiers, which was to say he treated him like a son. They were in complete agreement, according to De Mohrenschildt. However, Oswald may have been tipped off that he was going to be framed as a patsy as he was working with the FBI and other people. So, the plan may not actually have gone according to De Mohrenschildt's plan, and De Mohrenschildt might not have known all the details as he was out of country. Mr. Tannenbaum. Okay, now, at any time did George De Mohrenschildt indicate to you that there was more than one shooter of the president? Mr. Oltmans. Yes, definitely more than one shooter. Mr. Tannenbaum. Would you please tell us what he said? Mr. Oltmans. I couldn't at this moment. I want to be very precise. If I called that, I would have to adjourn and start looking through my notes, really, because you constantly say, look at your notes, but how could I do it? They're brief things, 10 pages. I would have to go through the notes. He took Valium. That was the poison he took. Mr. Tannenbaum. Now, please just take your time and read through your notes. Mr. Oltmans. Oswald wrote letters to Hunt, H.L. Hunt. H.L. Hunt was at the top, and at the bottom was Lee Harvey Oswald. De Mohrenschildt seemed to want to take responsibility for Oswald's actions, while at the same time denying responsibility for the assassination of Kennedy, implying that his relationship with Hunt, or their relationship with H.L. Hunt, was insanely cyclical. Nobody is sure who killed Kennedy, at least no one I know of. Even De Mohrenschildt wasn't sure that it was Oswald. And in fact, De Mohrenschildt gave reasons why he thought that Oswald didn't kill Kennedy. So we are still left in the chaos of confusion. De Mohrenschildt said that he has no proof that Oswald shot. He had set Oswald up not to shoot, but that Oswald may have shot or may not have shot, but that De Mohrenschildt had no way of finding out whether Oswald actually did shoot or not. On the question of whether there was a conspiracy, yes, definitely there was a conspiracy. Absolutely. That is not just a theory. Now, as De Mohrenschildt has killed himself, which apparently he has done, it seems as though he was capable of committing suicide, I am very sad, either way, that my friend is dead. Thank you for hearing my testimony today.